one of the definitions of plagiarism is using someone else's stuff.
Okay.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome back to the Appraiser Coach Podcast. My name is Dustin Harris. Today we are sponsored by OREP Insurance, OREP.org, and Alamode. You can find them at alamode.com. I want to welcome back to the program my good friend, my good colleague, my peer, the expert on USPAP, Mr. Tim Andersen, the Appraiser's Advocate. Welcome back to the program, Mr. Tim. How are you?
Dustin, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for that effulgent greeting. Would that it were true, but thank you anyway.
Oh, it always is true, my friend. So to set this up for our listeners, if you're new to the program, you might be new to this segment, which we call Dear USPAP Instructor. This is your opportunity to write in and send us your questions and things that you have going on in your life. There's a couple of them that I want to hit on today. Of course, we bring on the expert, Mr. Tim Andersen, who is the Appraiser's Advocate, to help answer these questions. Are you ready, Tim?
I'm always ready. Now, am I ready to say something pertinent and relevant? No, that's a different story, but I'm always ready.
Of course. Okay. So, all right, here we go, my friends. So the first one came in from a Jerry Jacobson. And the question on the table is, when is the new USPAP coming out? She says, it seems like it's been a long time. I thought it was supposed to come out every 2 years, but my last update was well over 2 years ago. Tim, what say you?
Okay, Jerry, thank you for the question. Yeah, it has been a long time. And before, yes, it was every 2 years, but COVID came along and mungled part of that up. And then politics came along and reared its ugly head. And the Appraisal Standards Board had to go in and make a mountain of additions, not so much changes, but additions to the ethics rule. And in fact, the additions to the ethics rule went through 5 drafts. And the last one was finally accepted. And the accepted draft is available. You can go to the Appraisal Foundation's website and get it. In fact, you should. And when USPAP is again published in January of 2024, it will be this new edition. But again, the only major change will be the addition to the ethics rule, which is rather lengthy. Now, there are some other minor changes. AO16 has been deleted to be replaced by AOs 39 and 40.
Do you remember what those were about?
Yeah, they were about discrimination, and AO16, 39 and 40 replace AO16, about the same thing.
Yeah.
They're just a little bit more explanatory. They go into a little bit more depth, but there are no changes in standards 1 and 2. And then there's some definitional changes. The definition of misleading has been deleted from USPAP. The definition of personal inspection has been clarified. The definition of appraiser has not been changed, but the comment that was in the 2018-2019 version, which was taken out in the 2020-21 version, has been put back in. So the definition of appraiser is still the same, but the comment has been put back in because a lot of folks felt it was necessary.
Got it. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, other little minor things, but the big one is now the ethics rule is quite extensive. There's nothing in the ethics rule now that wasn't there before, but there is a whole lot more detail in the ethics rule than there was before.
Good to know. So January 2024.
January 2024. Yeah.
Okay. So just to follow up on this question, it almost makes it sound like she has not done her update. I want to clarify here that just because there's not a USPAP, I think in most states you still have to have your update every 2 years, even if it's the old USPAP, right?
Right. And the next update that you'll have to take will have the new ethics rule in it.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Tim. And thank you, Jerry. Appreciate these questions. I want to pause here and remind you that we're sponsored by a couple of great companies out there. Of course, OREP Insurance has been a sponsor of this program for a long time. And of course, I've been utilizing them for my E&O for a very long time. And one of the reasons is the benefits that you receive. It's not just E&O, folks. They don't just have your back when it comes to insurance. They also have your back when it just comes to ongoing continued education. One of those classes is taught by my good friend Tim Andersen. He's talking about solid work files. Make sure that you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's. It's a great program. It's a great continuing ed program. I think in all states it counts toward your CE, and that's free, folks. If you're with OREP, you get that kind of benefit all the time. Check them out. Go to orep.org. That's OREP.org. And of course, a la mode is a sponsor here and has again been from the beginning. Why? Well, I think a la mode and I see eye to eye, meaning we both understand technology. One of the things that Tim and I are going to be talking about in just a few minutes. How do we utilize technology in our business? How do we utilize technology in the way that we appraise and that we do the evaluation practices that we do? A la mode has those things built in, folks. And are they a little bit more expensive than some of the competition? Yeah. Is it worth it? Yeah. Check them out. Go to alamode.com or 800 a la mode. And welcome back to the program, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out once again with my good friend, Mr. Tim Andersen. He's in his podcast chair. I'm in mine. Tell us about your podcast, Tim.
Which one?
the one that you can get on Spotify and Amber Radio and Apple Podcasts and everything else. That one.
That one. Okay, I have a podcast.
Excellent.
Oh, you want more? Oh, you want details? Oh, okay.
I'm trying to just hand it to you on a silver platter here.
Yeah, I do. I post about 2 a month on various topics. Some of them are rather esoteric. Some of them are practical. It just depends on what floats my boat any given week. And it's on my website. It's on Apple. It's on Spotify. I think I told you once I was diddling around on the internet one night late, and I found it on a Spanish language platform. It was in English, but it was a Spanish language platform. But anyway, it's out there, and I put up about 2 a month, and they're free. Yeah, anybody can listen to them. Awesome. And I appreciate those who do. Thank you.
Yeah, they're great. They're great. Short, sweet, to the point. And excellent to listen to. Great reminders. All right, Tim, our other question today comes from Mr. Anonymous. It could be Mrs. Anonymous, I'm not sure. But the question on the table is, Dustin, I saw your article on the Buzz recently about Chat GPT. What about plagiarism is the question. If you didn't write it, should you be using it? Folks, I tell you, I got more feedback. I'm going to call it feedback. Got more feedback on that article than I've had in a long time. Lots of very loud voices out there. And Tim, one of the things that was quoted quite often is, if you use Chat GPT, you're plagiarizing. What say you?
Okay, Dustin, it would be nice if there were a black and white answer to this question. One of the definitions of plagiarism is using someone else's stuff.
Okay.
Well, Chat GPT AI is not a someone. It's an it. It's a something. Although there are those who would argue that. I won't, at least not here. Yeah. So it's basically to go to Chat GPT and type. You can go to Chat GPT and type in "give me 750 words on highest and best use," and you'll get 750 words.
Yeah.
And then wait 5 minutes and go back and type in, "give me 750 words on highest and best use," and you'll get 750 words, and they're totally different.
Totally different.
Totally different. So You're not dealing with a person. You're not dealing with a copyrighted forum. You're not dealing with something that is unchangeable. I mean, you open a reference book, and whatever it says about the translation of Egyptian hieroglyphics is the same forever, because it's printed. Whereas Chat GPT literally will change as it expands its knowledge base, even though Chat GPT specifically is limited to stuff before 2021. And that's for a purpose. So if you just ask GPT a question and slip the answer, just type the answer directly into your report, is that plagiarism? Okay, Dustin, I can see how some people say it is. I would say it's not, simply because it does not meet the definition of using someone else's work, because AI is not a someone, it's a thing.
Yeah.
So I don't see it that way. I use AI in what I do, although simply because it writes differently than I do. I put it into my own voice. But before I spend 30 hours researching something, I will run it through AI and say, what can you tell me about thus and so? And then I get an answer. And then I either like it and use it, or don't like it and don't use it.
Okay.
But that's any author's prerogative. Now, just to be safe, should you jump in there and say, I asked Chat GPT this question, and the answer it gave me was essentially blah, 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 and then you insert it. Is that plagiarism? I don't think so, because you're citing your source. You're saying, I got this out of Chat GPT. But yet you were also the source, because you had to ask the question to get the answer.
Right.
And in asking the question, you were directing the parameters of the answer. So it's your work.
Right.
It's just it's Chat GPT's answer to your question. So the conductor gets up in front of the orchestra, and the orchestra is not playing the violin and not playing the timpani and not playing the oboe, but yet the conductor is basically given credit for the orchestra's work, because it's the conductor who takes all of those disparate elements and turns them into something beautiful. Well, you had a question, either your own or someone else's question. You thought about it. You formed the question. Then you asked the question to a source that is capable of answering it, and it answered your question in the context of your question. So had it not been for your question, had you not raised the issue, you would have not had an answer.
Yeah.
As a result, you were the genesis of the answer. So it's basically your work. And at least that's how I see it now. Just pretend you're my wife and you won't agree with me. So, and nobody has to agree with me. But there are so many other major problems in real estate appraisal that this is literally, worrying about plagiarism from Chat GPT, is, if anything represents rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, it's that. The last week, and we're recording this at the very end of May in 2023. Last week, the appraisal subcommittee had a series of hearings on diversity, et cetera, in real estate appraisal. And it was obvious that the appraisal subcommittee had no clue what it is the Appraisal Foundation and the ASB and the AQB do. And listening to what went on, listening to the questions, listening to the obvious agenda of the members of the ASC who were there to interrogate the panel members. There's a lot more going on there that we need to worry about.
Right.
And there is of whether using Chat GPT is plagiarism or not.
Well, Tim,
that's my opinion, Dustin. You asked for it.
I asked for it, and we love your opinions here. It's interesting, though, Tim. And by the way, I want to ask you about USPAP ramifications, if there are any. But before we get to that answer, I find it interesting when you type into Google, and Google is been doing AI for a long time, meaning all Chat GPT is a language model, right? It's a predictive language model. In fact, the P in Chat GPT stands for predictive, right? And so when you start to type something into a search engine, it's interesting because it takes what other people have typed in before and predicts what you're about to say. All I had to do, Tim, in Google was type in is using. That's it. That's the only two words. And guess what the first suggestion was? Plagiarism. Using Chat GPT plagiarism. People are searching this left and right because it's a concern. But I think you're spot on in your opinion. Let's talk about USPAP for a second. So let's talk specifically about appraisal and valuation, right? Any concerns using Chat GPT when it comes to USPAP specific requirements?
No, because you're going to do research anyway. I mean, okay, so you don't go to Chat GPT, you go to the county records. And you're going to say, okay, please give me all the sales in the neighborhood XYZ. Well, the county records are perfectly capable of doing that.
Right.
You will indicate as part of your scope of work that you check the county record, but you're not going to make 16 phone calls to find out which county clerk entered the record. That's irrelevant.
Right.
And when you put down that 1234 Elm Street sold for $375,000, you're not plagiarizing anything because that's public record.
Right. Right.
And when you say when you cite the MLS as saying 1234 Elm Street sold for $375,000, you don't have to, even though it's copyrighted through the MLS. Because you are a member of that MLS and you have the license to use that data, you don't have to expose the copyright or anything like that. You just use it and move on. So, and then again, you pick up the phone and you call the broker and say, "Hi, did 1234 Elm Street sell for $375,000?"
Verification.
Yeah, that's just verification. Mm-hmm. Now, you ought to have the specific data in your work file. But do you need to render that specific data into the report? You can if you want to.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. So again, I think appraisers got a whole lot bigger problems to worry about than whether using Chat GPT in an appraisal report is plagiarism. Yeah. As I indicated, I don't think so.
Yeah. No,
I don't arbitrate those matters. And there are probably those with a greater authority than I who may have a different answer. Well, fine, I'll concede to those with greater authority, but that's I wouldn't get terribly worried about that.
Yeah.
Quite frankly.
I hold in my hot little hand. If you're on YouTube, you see this, right? I got a standard calculator. A calculator is a tool. You punch some numbers in there, you get an answer. You could do that by longhand. There's a lot of different ways you could utilize this tool, but it's only a tool, right? I mean, do we punch numbers into a calculator, get an answer, and then in our reports cite the Casio MS80TV as our source? Of course not, right? To me, I see it the same way. I see it no differently than Grammarly, right? Grammarly, if you're familiar, folks, with Grammarly, it's a tool. You can take a paragraph that you've written yourself, plug it into Grammarly, and say, hey, clean this up, make this look better, help me with my punctuation, my spelling, the way I've said this. Now, Chat GPT is a much more powerful tool than Grammarly, of course, but it's only a tool. And I'm guessing, Tim, that one of the reasons that appraisers are having such a fit about this is because it's new, it's change, it's different, and we are programmed to question change.
Well, there's nothing wrong with questioning change. We should question change. We should question everything. You should question absolutely every article of faith that you have ever heard, simply because we cannot accept anything as true, but that we have proven it to be true, at least in real estate appraisal. Okay. Now, you don't sit down and type your report and then say, oh, by the way, I used a la mode to type my report. Nobody cares. A la mode had absolutely nothing to do with your report. Right. It just took your finger strokes and turned them into readable letters. That's all.
Great point.
So, I don't, we have to verify everything. And it is the verification that turns data, mere data, into information that the client can use. So if we don't verify, all we're doing is giving the client data, and the client can get that from an AVM. So it is what we do with our minds that takes, well, yeah, that happened. 1, 2, 3, 4 Elm Street sold for $350,000 and turns it into information. Why did it sell for $350,000? What was the motivation of the parties? How long did it have to stay on the market to sell for $350,000? Was that its market value, or did somebody get a bargain? You know, that kind of thing. This is what the client wants to know.
Right.
Right. The client doesn't, well, I have to be pleasant here. The client doesn't care whether you put stuff into GPT or Google, or you picked up the phone and called the county clerk and asked.
Right.
Because that's irrelevant.
They're looking for a credible report.
They're looking for a credible value opinion in a persuasive, easy to understand, non-misleading report.
Very good. I don't want to belabor the point, Tim, but you made a point earlier that I want to make sure it gets on the air, because I think it helps us to see this in a little bit of a different light. To set this up, you helped me to answer the question for anonymous, Mr. or Mrs. And one of the things you mentioned was other people's reports, meaning, and let me just tell a quick story. And this is not to throw anybody under the bus. I'm not going to use any names, but there was a time that I had to let somebody go. Let's just say we parted ways. About 6 weeks later, I received a field review or a desk review, and the report was sent over. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're reviewing ourselves. We better turn this down. When I started to look a little bit further, I realized, no, this just looks like our reports. And this must be so-and-so, because it looks like he basically took and copied. I should say he or she took and copied every bit of my report and without citing it. Now, did I go after this guy? Did they get all bent out of shape? No, I don't care. Whatever. But if you want to talk about plagiarism, how often do appraisers, well, tell me the point you made to me, or that you made to Anonymous on this.
Well, again, the point is, how many appraisers have, you're sitting at lunch with another appraiser, and the other appraiser says, you know what, I just got some really good boilerplate. And appraiser B says, whoa, send it over and I'll use it. Mm-hmm. Okay, and A sends it to B and B uses it. Does B cite A? No.
Right.
Okay, so is that plagiarism? In the narrowest, most technical definition of the word, yes, it is. But because A doesn't care, and obviously B doesn't care, and the client doesn't care, hell, the client doesn't even read it. There's no reason to get excited about it.
Yeah. And to be fair to those that are asking the question, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous, let me just, I mentioned earlier that you type into Google is using, and the predictive language says Chat GPT plagiarism. In other words, so many people have asked this. The very first, at least of this recording, the very first thing that came up was an article, and I'm going to cite it, from mlyearning.org. I have no idea what that is. But the paragraph that comes up, I'm just going to read it word for word, because I think it kind of makes the point. The answer is Chat GPT itself cannot be plagiarized, as it is a language model. However, the content generated by Chat GPT can be plagiarized if it closely resembles existing content without attribution. Okay. Now, the key here, and the reason I want to be fair to individuals that have this question, is one of the criticisms, Tim, that I got quite often with the article that I put out on the Buzz about ChatGPT. And by the way, if you want to look that up, just type in ChatGPT on the Buzz, you'll find the article. But it had to do with certain prompts that I had used to help me in my appraisal writing process. Again, as a tool only. But one of the concerns is, and I think this is a fair, legitimate concern, that we don't always know where the data came from that ChatGPT got its information from. In other words, you ask a prompt, you give it a prompt, you ask a question, it goes out, searches its big database, and comes back with its unique answer. Yes, it's unique, but there's no citing of I got it from here, and I got it from here, and I got it from here. And the concern is, if it got it, too closely from a certain source, then there is a worry that maybe that might be plagiarism because it's not cited, which only goes, Tim, to your point, that everything that goes in this appraisal report is yours and yours alone. You take responsibility for it, and don't just trust, but verify the information. Am I right?
Yes. And Dustin, I've read literally hundreds of state appraisal board decisions. over the years, and I think plagiarism was an issue in one of them.
Mm.
And the plagiarism was blatant.
Mm.
And then basically, and then I've read one court case in which plagiarism was an issue. And the court decided that a broker had taken an appraiser's appraisal report and incorporated it wholesale into an offering circular.
Mm-hmm.
And you might be familiar with the case, but this is a one-off thing. So obviously, plagiarism is not something that circuit court judges and state appellate court judges and Supreme Court judges lay awake at night worrying about.
Right.
Especially when it comes to the content of a real estate appraisal. So, you want to worry about it. That's not where I'm going to put my time and effort and concern.
Right. And I appreciate that, Tim. And the bottom line is, if you're worried about it, then cite it. Right. If you want to put that in your report and say, I got this paragraph from Chat GPT, then do it. I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah, I don't. Say here's the question I asked, and here's Chat GPT's answer. Quote, blah 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 blah. Unquote. Move on. What's the problem?
I love it, Tim. You're always well spoken and to the point. Where can people find you, Tim?
Dustin, my email address is tim@theappraisersadvocate.com, and I will be happy to answer their questions and consult with them on issues that come up.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you all for joining us, both here on the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can find us at The Appraiser Coach on YouTube. Appreciate you being on. As always, Tim, my best to you and your family.
Dustin, thank you. My best to you and yours, as always.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.